originally from Uganda. I'm sure most of you have been asked, or your parents have been asked, where are you from, really from? And I always like to go from the origin. So I'm from northern Uganda, which is in East Africa. And my mom decided that she wanted a better life for herself and her four children, and brought us to the UK. I remember coming to UK, it was October, it was cold, it was freezing. And my first reaction to my mom was like, why are we here? And she thought I was a very ungrateful teenager. I'm sure some of you can identify with, just expressing your view and your opinion. So growing up in Uganda was beautiful. I grew up in northern Uganda, a small village. We had no running water, no electricity. If we wanted fruit, we got it from a mango tree. If we wanted water, the girls went and fetched water, and the boys, I don't know what the boys were doing. They always seemed to be having fun, but the girls were always busy, either cooking or cleaning or getting water or doing something. So a sense of responsibility from a very young age. And then war broke out. So finally, we couldn't live in our village. There was a lot of kidnapping going on. So we moved, I would say from primary four. I remember being in class one morning, and then we were told you have to run. And then, you run for a few months and then come back to the same classroom, or you'd go to another school. So schooling, even though I really love being at school, it was never straightforward for me. I want to give you that backdrop because it tells you why education became so important to me, even when I came to the UK. So going to school was a novelty. Was something that I loved doing. So coming back to the UK in 93, arriving in the UK was cold. We lived in a council flat. Showing you what the council flat looked like back in those days. And I say those days because I'm a bit older than most of you here. If you were in a council flat, it meant, you were on social housing. Your parents didn't have much. If we wanted new clothing, it was from a secondhand shop. Not that we complain, you just embraced it. I remember helping my mom, trying to make money from the age of 14, getting small jobs to make sure that, my mom, who was a nurse, we had enough electricity. So, it was, I would say, what we call now cost of living. It was, it wasn't easy, seeing my mom struggling, it was not easy. And that became my motivation to want to do really well in my education. So I saw education not just as something that was a novelty, it was a necessity. So no one had to ask me to go to school in the morning. No one had to ask me to leave the library. At my lunchtime, I spent all my time, in the library, which was great because sometimes I was bullied. So I had to run and hide in the library. And those that were bullying me didn't really like, reading books that much. So they left me alone. So fast forward, so arriving in the UK and going from imagine arriving, in the UK, your education has been disrupted. You speak very little English for that matter, and you're put in year nine, right? And some of you probably, know year nine, that's when you start thinking about your GCSEs. And for me, I didn't even know what GCSE was. I didn't know what college was. I didn't know what the structure of education was in the UK. But I was just determined to do really well, right? That was drummed into me. And most African, and I would say, most, non-British family of immigrants, education is so important to us. It's a pride for your parents, to know that you've had a good education is what they've sacrificed, why they've come here or moved countries, is to offer you a better life. So for me, I was just determined. So I found out I had to do GCSEs when I was in year 10, choosing my subjects. Sorry, in year nine, right? Year nine, you choose your GCSEs. And I remember choosing all my subjects, and I wanted to do acting. I thought I would be a good actor. And then during, work placement, I did a bit of work experience at a theater, and I didn't really enjoy it because I spent all my time making tea and coffee. So I thought, okay, no acting for me. I'm gonna work in an office. I like dressing up, in a suit, power suit. And that was really good. I now had an image of what I could be in the future. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew that, when I'm older, I'm going to work in an office and I'm going to do a lot of traveling. So I did my A levels. I chose English. Actually, before I did my A level, my teacher said I was going to fail. So that's another thing that I want to share with you is that people will underestimate you because it could be your appearance or it could be your, how you speak or your religion. that is okay, but you can't underestimate yourself. You gotta know yourself and you gotta have really high self-worth. So for me, my teacher told me you're gonna fail English because it's your second language. You don't even speak it that well anyway. But I was thinking, okay, you wait and see. And I actually got a B in English. So I was like, okay, I can do anything. I can actually now do anything. So I had that instinct I studied business and IT at university because I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. Right. So some of you are at that age now where people are asking you, what do you want to be? What do you want to study? And it's really stressful because, you don't know. No one even know. I didn't know. So when I came time to applying for university, I chose three business studies courses, three IT courses. And I remember I wanted to go as far away from my mom and my brothers as possible. So I was applying to Manchester, Edinburgh, and all these universities far, far away. But actually, when the time came, I thought actually I can't really leave my mom and my brothers. So I applied to Kingston University, and there, it was the admission team that called me and said, "Look, we can see that you've applied for computer science and business studies. Clearly, you don't know what you want to do, but we have a course that has combined the two." So that really helped me, right? Because at that point, I thought, yes, I can do this. So I chose a course that was for 4 years. And at Kingston University, I had 1 year to work at British Airways, which again is super important. If you have an opportunity to do an internship, even if it's for free, please do it. If you have Saturday, for 1 hour, go and work at a charity shop. Get some valuable work experience, even if it's got nothing related to what you want to be in the future. Just get out there and get some experience. Because for me, working for British Airways, it was the best thing ever. I was in the head office. I was treated like a normal employee. And the reason why I put this emoji of a table is, there wasn't like a ranking like, okay, you're too young or you're not, they treated me like I was a fully qualified person. So that from that moment on, I had that mindset that no one will put me down or below where I shouldn't be, I belong there. So this whole question about do I belong, or, that sense of belonging, some of it is to do with ourselves, how we put ourselves in situations. So for me, I was determined to say, oh, you know what? I've worked really hard. I'm still learning. I don't know everything, but I'm going to put myself on the same level. I won't be putting myself below because when you do that, you're going to try and catch up and you really just cannot. You can't compete with people's experience. You can't compete with people's, background, whether because they've come from money or from, better education. You can't. So the most important thing is you can do is, have the self-compassion and kindness. After British Airways, I was offered a job, but unfortunately there was 9/11, so they were not recruiting anymore. So now I went back to uni saying, "Oh, I've got a job," to like, oh, now I don't have a job. What on earth do I do? And I remember spending my summer you know, um, in the library because remember there was no computer, right? So this is, 2002, right? So 2002, there was no like handheld, tablet or whatever. I had to physically go into a library to apply for these jobs, right? So I applied for one of their grad job, which was a Shell, and they had 2,000 people. It was shortlisted to 40. We had to go through like intensive assessment center. And I remember sitting in a room with, candidates from Oxford University, Cambridge University, and there was a little old me from Kingston University. And I just remember, I'm not gonna get this job. There's no way I'm gonna get the job. So when I finally got in, they said, okay, why should we give you the job? And I thought to myself, well, why not? You know, I really want this job. I really want to work for your company. I really want to travel. I can see I can make a difference. And then based on that, they said, okay, fine, we'll offer you the job. So I had 12 years at Shell where I led global projects. I worked in Germany. I worked, in all the airports across Europe. I've been to them because again, back in those days, you have to physically upgrade your software, on a PC. There was nothing like cloud computing or remote, control anything. You had to physically travel, right? So I've been to all the airports across Europe, upgraded their IT systems. And then at some point I decided, you know what, I want to now go back to university and study MBA. And at first, the company said, "Oh, yeah, we'll sponsor you because we're actually trying to advance, women in the organization. We need more leaders that are diverse." But after 2 or 3 years of asking and proving myself and not getting the sponsorship, I just, I had a mentor who told me, said, "Well, Faith, if you want to do these studies, why don't you fund it yourself?" And I thought, well, where am I going to get £40,000 to pay for an MBA? Then he said, well, go to the bank, ask the bank, maybe they can lend you the money. And there was a NatWest, funding for further education. And that's what I did. So when I went to Imperial, arrived there thinking, okay, I'm nearly 30. I've just newly married. I'm planning to have a family and I want to get these studies out of my way, right? So that was my plan. So that's exactly what I did. So at the end of my MBA, which was for 2 years, I was still working full time. I was heavily pregnant and I finished my MBA and I had my baby and all that stuff. So and then I had took a year out. I went back to work, was promoted to another role, completely different from what I was doing. So now I moved from IT to marketing. And the reason why I did that was I recognized that my talent or my abilities with people, yes, I love systems, but I'm a people person. So what that basically means is that you need to discover what is your key strength and play to that. Okay. So if somebody wants you to be, like my mom wanted me to be a doctor, because it sounds really good. My daughter is a doctor. I don't I don't like blood. I don't like being in a hospital environment, right? I don't even like tablets. So how on earth am I going to be a good doctor? And I couldn't see it. So one of the things I can, advice I can give you is that quickly discover what you're good at, right? What are your talents? What do people tell you you're good at? There's lots of different tests you can do online to show you your strength. Your career office might even give you some of this advice, right? They might tell you, that try this test and find out what is your personality like. What is are you someone who like working with their hands? Or are you somebody who like, studying? So discover your strength because that's going to be the key for you. So when I went back to Shell after my first baby, I worked in marketing. I was given another big role again. And I was really, thriving, but something was missing, right? My sense of purpose, my sense of impact. I was doing a lot of voluntary work, coaching and mentoring. But my day job was there, but it wasn't what was making me wake up in the morning. So in 2015, I had this, idea for a business, and that's what led me to leaving the organization. So I founded, Transformation 21st, which is the company I've been running for 11 years now. And I partner with organizations, HSBC, PwC, even Shell, AstraZeneca, and I deliver coaching to their leaders, to their women, to diverse staff. So in the day when D&I, diversity, inclusion, equity, inclusion is a big thing. I've gone out in organizations and deliver targeted, coaching programs and mentoring programs because again, recognize that everyone is different. We're all unique, right? And when you work in an organization where you don't see people that look like you or sound like you, it can affect your self-confidence and your self-worth. So for me, knowing how I felt being in a global organization and speaking to various people from different background, it's been, for me a superpower because I can relate to people and I can help, people break barriers that they face in their careers. So that's what I've been doing, and obviously a lot of traveling. On top of that, I have written a book called Transform Within. Again, the idea of the book came to me because people kept saying, Faith, your story is really inspiring. How did you get to where you got to? So in the book, I try to share a bit of my, my recipe for success. And it's some of those what I've written here is what I've learned in that journey. I've also done a TED talk, sorry, TEDx talk, which again is about, once you become a coach, they're like, okay, now what's next? What's next, right? So it's about always aiming high and always having that dream. So what have I learned then, in all the things that I've done? And there's just so much I couldn't pack in here. I've also volunteered as a UN, UK, sorry, UN Women UK participants, where, I champion girls and women equality globally. So there's been a lot of stuff that I do on top of my, my role as a wife and a mother and running my company. But one of the things I want to leave with you is what I've learned. Believe in yourself. Okay. I know it's not easy, but just practice positive self-talk, right? Set smart goals. So smart is basically be very specific about your goals. Make sure that you can measure your goals. Make sure that it's achievable and it's realistic and that it's time bound. Okay. Yes, you might want to be an astronaut, but to get to being an astronaut, you might need to get the A-level sciences. You might need to, go to a good university or do good internship. So, make good connections. So try and be really specific with your goals. And then, ask for help. That's what we're here for. Just find people, create a LinkedIn profile if you're old enough and you feel confident enough to do that. You know, start making connections. There's a lot of workshops and conferences in London that, you can attend as a student for free, right? Start thinking about that. Step outside your comfort zone, right? It would be very easy for me to just stick with my Ugandan friends and family or to join an African network, but the world is big and it's global and international. So try and see whether you can find like-minded individuals that you can connect with. Prioritize your health. That is something that no one told me. So I had to, because I was so driven, I was burning out often. So try and learn how to, look after your health, whether that's your fitness, whether that's, your faith, if you have faith, just small things like that can actually impact your well-being. And keep learning. Learning is for life. You never stop. And then for me, what has been really central to me has been my family, it's been my faith, it's been being resilient. So great. I wanted that, I didn't get it. Fine. I've learned from that, I move on. And then be positive. Right now, the world is full of negativity. Be that positive light. And then finally, my most recent, I guess, achievement is being named UK Top 50 Leading Light. And that for me is, if I've done nothing else in this world, I have been a leading light. And I'm hoping that you can all be a leading light in your own way. I think that's the end. Otherwise, I can just carry on, Pfizer. So thank you for listening and please ask me questions.